So first off, you want to just introduce yourself, what you do, and where you work?
My name's Andrew Porter. I am don't even know honestly what my exact title is at this point, but basically it was at one point digital content lead. We've changed companies so many times, but I basically run social media and digital content um, for WIP, which includes 94WIP.com and the social media channels.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, kind of tell me how you started out and how you got connected with WIP in the beginning.
Sure. I went to Penn State for undergraduate. I was actually a marketing major, but while I was at Penn State, it was I graduated in 2012, so I was there from 2008 to 2012. And during that time, I was right when the internet and social media was kind of starting and taking off and getting created. And I started a blog and an online radio show on my own. It was a kind of like a blend between Penn State and Philadelphia sports with a little bit of lifestyle stuff in there, modeled sort of like Barstool Sports, but more college oriented. And it kind of took off. It grew well. It gave me some really good experience, and I parlayed that into becoming working for WIP. Is basically I started as a part-time employee. We were under CBS Radio at the time. We had an application where people could vote on polls. It's called the Audio Roadshow app, and they can vote on polls and like record 10-second voice memos and send it to the station. So I was in charge of that for my first year or two there, and from there, kind of worked my way as different program directors came and went. I worked my way up into working with Spike Eskin, who was doing social media, and I kind of took over for him and became digital content for WIP, and have been there doing that role since, for almost about 10 years now.
Nice. So take me through a typical day at your job right now. What you kind of do to start out the day and what your day kind of looks like.
Yeah, that's a good question. So it varies a lot, as you can imagine, in the sports world because we're very dependent on the news and the structure. But my day starts pretty early, and I kind of focus on we're focusing our goals are right now we're focusing on our three main shows, morning, midday, and afternoon. So my goal is the benchmark for every day is to make sure we get some sort of good audio from each show. Sometimes it's not every day for every show, but you don't want it to be too, what's the word, repetitive or something like that. So, but I'm waking up, going online, and I'm trying to package the audio on air from the morning show and midday show and afternoon show and distributing it online in a creative, thoughtful way where we can engage viewers and kind of, let people know what we're setting up the day, what the big topic is today, how our hosts, what their opinions are on the biggest topics in Philly sports for the day, and trying to set the tone online the way we set the tone on the air because it's kind of two different vehicles, but we're trying to merge that as much as possible and create some synergy there. And then throughout the day, it's push alerts towards our station to getting people to listen. It's we have exclusive interviews throughout the day. So if we ever have an exclusive interview of someone from one of the sports teams, a coach, a manager, it's getting that interview podcasted and working with the producers to get that podcasted and get that story up on our website quickly. Same with breaking news or any trades or any relevant breaking news throughout the day. So it's kind of, and then even when I'm technically not working, you always have to keep an eye on it because that's just the nature of it. So you never know when stuff can happen at night. Sometimes it's posting highlights on social media from even if it's a Sixers game or something like that. Different interviews that can spark conversation, maybe jumping on at night and kind of doing that kind of stuff. So you're never really done. But the main daily focus is our three main shows and converting that audio and making sure that audio and their takes are part of the dialogue on the internet.
Yeah. And so for you, what are the key points for that? Like what are the keys to converting audio into great digital content?
It's a good question, and it's really there's really like no set formula. It's kind of I kind of have the pulse of what we want to do based on experience. But traditionally speaking and generally speaking, our host's strongest takes and strongest opinions are going to be their opening segments because that's where they're going to set the show, and that's where they're going to hit their main points. So um, usually that's going to be the best content in terms of engagement. Is going to be it's the most interesting and entertaining content is going to be their openings. But then again, throughout the day, I'm always listening to the station too. You kind of have it on in the background, and maybe you catch something here and there, and you're going to have like big exclusive interviews, which are huge drivers too for us because that those exclusive interviews it really differentiates us from other media outlets because we do get to talk to people like Nick Sirianni and people like Jalen Hurts and people like Bryce Harper. They do come on our station, so that's really that when we have those days, those are big hallmark moments because we're promoting those and we're distributing those, and hopefully, getting creating some content out of those interviews.
Mhm. Yeah, and so what are the biggest platforms for you in terms of focus on social?
So we're the main three. We're obviously on the main three, which are Facebook, X/Twitter, and Instagram. We're on Threads. We're on Threads as well, but um, mostly those three. I feel like in the sports world, X is kind of the biggest conversation driver right now in terms of
Mm.
driving conversation, driving brand, driving news, and especially in sports and politics right now. That's just kind of where it is. Um, but in terms of generating like clicks and engagement, Facebook would still be our number one driver based on our demographic and based on the way things are working. I don't know that we're not really worried about converting traffic on X. It's more so like to drive brand awareness and to drive different, packaging different video clips. And, we're experimenting with different things as these platforms are, as they're changing constantly, especially over this last year, especially, Twitter's went from Twitter to X. It has Elon Musk running things. So that's changing constantly. Facebook's, they're changing constantly as well. So, and with Instagram and they add threads. So there's always like these changing these variables all the time. But yeah, we're focused on all of them and growing those ones as best we can.
Yeah, so what are the sort of strategies or benchmarks that you look at in terms of growing audience on those different platforms?
Um, engagement, reach, follower counts, all that stuff is very quantifiable. You can measure that. You can see growth. You can see when when engagement's high, when reach is high on Facebook. And a lot of times, obviously, it's going to be correlated to how our teams are performing because that's it's the same with ratings. I mean, when the Eagles are in the Super Bowl and the Phillies are in the World Series, the work kind of does itself. I mean, the content is just endless. When you have a down year and you're in February and there's nothing going on, then you have to start to have some creative meetings and start to kind of get creative and drum up some interest. But yeah, the metrics are, I mean, all three of those sites make it very easily for you to follow analytics, see engagement, see reach, see follower counts, see best interacting post, all that stuff. What's harder to quantify is the brand and if you're growing your brand positively. And sometimes you have to pass, and sometimes we do pass on certain things. Um, because sometimes something said on air might not relay it best on digital on social media. So there's a balance there as well because there's a fine line because we don't want to make our host look bad at the expense of engagement either. You know what I mean?
Mhm. Yeah, so tell me a little bit about the relationship then with the hosts and the talent in terms of kind of going into what you were just saying, like being a good representative for the brand.
Yeah, that's a huge part of it. And pre-COVID, I was in the office every day, and I developed really, really strong relationships with all the hosts, and most of whom are still there. And I know them all well personally, but they've all been great. And recently, over the past year or so, we've really ramped up converting their takes onto digital because we're trying to drum up audio basically is we're focused on audio. So like we're definitely packaging more of their takes and you know if there's ever anything controversial or there's anything teetering the line, I always ask them and get their permission, and they can always say like, hey, they have a communication channel with me, and they can always say, hey, maybe this isn't best online, or this isn't what I meant to say, so please don't say this and stuff like that. So it's a communication, it's understanding our hosts, having a relationship with them, the dialogue with them, and then kind of understanding the pulse of how this will be interpreted online versus on the air.
Mhm. So with IP, and let's just use Twitter as an example. You have the main IP account, and then you have the individual show accounts. Are you running the show accounts too, or are those done by producers?
Those are done by producer and by their shows.
Okay. And tell me a little bit about that, in terms of the kind of balancing content and how like those individual show accounts contribute to like larger strategy and what you're trying to accomplish on social.
Yeah, I think it just allows those shows to be a little bit more personable. They could do a little bit more with their accounts if they want. And to be honest, it's not a main focus, so they kind of do as much or as little as they want with those accounts. Some of them honestly don't do much. They just do poll questions or try to do something for the show. Um, I think the morning show does a good job with theirs, but they have more manpower too. So a lot of it comes down to manpower and personnel and resources. But yeah, I think it's kind of like a formula that's worked, and we kind of stay in our lanes. Each show kind of knows what they should and shouldn't do, and they don't really, maybe in the beginning they've experimented a little bit, but once we've realized what works, we kind of stick with that and go from there. And we have a lot of people that have been with the station for multiple years, and we kind of understand the way it works at this point.
Yep. And so you have a couple people working to help you with social specifically, right? Like a social team.
Yeah, there are other people that can post. I do the majority of it, but yeah, I mean, there are other people that help out with video, and with events and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and how does that sort of delegation work for you? Or how does that sort of team operate?
Ava is the assistant program director, and she does a lot of like the non sports content stuff. So like maybe like a sponsor pictures of food and sponsor stuff, events, Instagram live at events, different stuff like that. If there's something in station that's happening that needs to be filmed and I'm not there because I work primarily from home, so she'll film that. Um, and then Tucker Bagley helps me with a lot of the video content, which we've recently started, and we're repackaging that stuff. We have a cameras in our studio now, so we can now, we're clipping videos, and some of the the takes from our hosts are not just in print, but we can post the video clips. So he'll send me those video clips, and I'll post them on our social media channels as well. But again, it's the same thing. It goes back to communications and relationships, and I'm very close with Ava and Tucker, and they we kind of feel each other out at this point. We know like what each person's role is, and if anyone has a question, just a simple phone call, text, hey, I'm doing this, you doing this, what's going on here. But yeah, it's just a lot of it's communication, relationships, and that's really the bulk of anything in business, right? It's like you've got to build the strong relationships with your employees and trust them, and they trust me. So like I'm very thankful because Rod and they're very hands off, and they trust me to do a good job, and they let me do my thing, and I think that's been great.
Yeah, no, that's huge for social in terms of also just being able to try new things when you have the full trust of, bosses and everything like that.
Yep,
So
exactly.
so you're working from home. So is it just like you have cameras in the studio and it's just like a live stream that you're just clipping from, or like how does the clipping process work from you if you're remote?
Yeah, so for Tucker handles all the video stuff, and and YouTube, which I didn't mention. He's really grown our YouTube platform. So maybe he's someone you can talk to as well, but
Yeah.
he's really handling all the video. He's the point on all the video. I will do a lot of like the posting on certain platforms of the video, but he's the one that's gathering them, clipping them, and he's pretty much revamp. He's pretty much putting them all and repackaging them for our YouTube channel, which is kind of been revamped by him over the past 6 months or so, and it's been some really good stuff on our YouTube channel, which we're trying to grow as well.
Yeah, it's awesome. So, I mean, you mentioned that, especially when stuff like the Eagles not only getting to the Super Bowl, but being red hot in terms of like Kelsey and Hurts being a national conversation, and then the Phillies making it to the World Series at the same time. Kind of looking back at the past decade that you've been here, what have been some of the biggest wins on social that you've seen?
Wow, that's a really good question. I remember like we've had we've broken some stories on the air. We had a former Eagle player back in the day when I was working with when Spike was doing social and I was working for him. We had a former Eagles player mentioned that Nnamdi Asoma was eating lunch in his car. That was like went super viral. We had during the NFL draft, which was in Philadelphia in 2017, maybe 2017. We had Don McNabb live on our show, which we was like Facebook Live was just starting, so we were able to film that on Facebook Live, and that was like massive. Um, we've had some really big interviews that have done really well. We've had it's hard off the top of my head to really recall because some of the random stuff does really well on social, and some of like the exclusive stuff doesn't do as well. But we've had even this past year, Bryce Harper mentioned that he hit a home run for one of our callers, and that was a cool moment for us. We had Jason Kelsey do a beer chugging contest with one of our morning show hosts in Seattle this year, which was really cool. Great video, obviously. We've had Jason Kelsey come in and guest host on WIP for a full show for the morning show. Nick Sirianni's had some great interviews. And then when Angelo was working for WIP, who he retired last, 2 Februarys ago, he had some explosive interviews with guys like Gabe Kapler and Chip Kelly. And, he had a whole thing with Chip Kelly where he brought him, he was bringing him pies. Chip Kelly was bringing him pies. So they're just like, and then you have Howard Eskin, he just had Rob Thompson on, and he's had Charles Barkley on, and he's had huge interviews from certain athletes. We've had so many, honestly, like there isn't like one that like sticks out in my head that's like, oh my God, this is the one. But maybe our biggest post on X was probably off the top of my head. It probably was Jason Kelsey saying that Travis Kelsey and Taylor Swift were dating on the morning show, which we kind of broke the news. No one's really sure if he said that or what exactly he said, but he basically broke the news on our morning show. So that had over like a million. That has over like a million views or something. That's got to be one of our top posts.
Mhm. And so when a moment like that hits, are you just like all over it on social? And
Yeah, exactly. You kind of know leading up to it, like, Jason Kelsey's coming on and this Taylor Swift story is a big story. So like in the back of my head, I'm like, I didn't talk to the morning show previously, but like in the back of my head, I'm like, I have a feeling that Joe's going to ask about this. So like you're waiting there ready for it. Sometimes you even have a story pre-written if you have like a big interview where what the topic is. Let's say like Nick Sirianni's coming on and like the topic is about Jalen Hurts' injury. So you have that story pre-written ready to go. But yeah, exactly. When like a big moment like that happens, it's all hands on deck, and we make sure we get everything up as quick as possible, because we know you can feel it when it's going to be a big story. You just.
yeah. Yeah, and so kind of on the flip side of that, what have been some of the bigger challenges that you've run into managing these platforms in your time at WIP?
It's a good question. I think like again, it's the biggest challenge is merging on air with digital, because online's forever. Online is really forever. We've had different hosts, but someone like Angelo, who maybe says some things that would offend the fan base on air. It is what it is, but our reach online is just so massive that you know it's there are many people that are scrolling Twitter that aren't listening to the show, or can take something out of context. So you really don't want to convert something to digital from on air and make an enemy out of one of our own people. We don't want to turn it against them. We don't want them to be taken out of context if they're speaking negatively about the Eagles or the Phillies, because really, most 99% of our followers are all fans of the sports team, and it's kind of like an echo chamber world now where people don't want to hear negative stuff. They want to hear positive stuff. So on air, it's like, they have 4-hour shows every single day where they have to talk about different topics and the sports teams every single day for 4 hours a day. So naturally, you're going to get some speculation. You're going to get some negative stuff. You're going to get some weird stuff. You're going to get some non-sports stuff. You're going to get some all different types of topics. So I want to make sure that our hosts are being conveyed properly. And that's kind of I never would want to put someone in a bad spot where they were like, not happy with the way they were being portrayed. So that's always a fine balance there as well. That's probably the toughest part.
Mhm. And so you kind of touched on it, but like really, can you dive in like how different those like the true radio audience and the wider social media audience can be? Because I mean, as you're saying, like people tuning in for radio or tuning in for the host, they're going through the ebb and flows of the show, but you're pulling people from social from all over. And it really is that sort of echo chamber that you talked about.
Yeah, it's a really weird climate. It's tough today. Because I mean, I don't know the ratings off the top of my head, but I don't know how many people are listening to every show for 4 hours a day. Now we have an Odyssey app, which is great. It allows you to rewind and listen on demand to pretty much entire shows. Now we're podcasting our full shows on the app, so you can go back and listen to the full shows at your convenience, which is really, really nice, and it gives you context and it allows you to develop relationships with the hosts. And it's kind of like a TV show, right? Like if you watch the same TV show every day, you start to you become part of the show. You realize the nuances. You start to like the characters. You feel the show. If you're just popping in for one episode of The Office or one episode of Seinfeld, you don't really understand the jokes. It's not that funny to you because you haven't been there for season 1, 2, and 3. You're just popping in for season 4, episode 7, and you're just like, I don't get it. So that's kind of what online is like. It's like most of these people online aren't necessarily huge fans of the show that follow us. I don't know. I mean, we have 227,000 followers on X. I don't know how many of those people are huge fans of the show or just huge fans of Philadelphia sports. And obviously there's a overlap there, but a lot of people can be just, following us for Eagles news or Phillies news or Flyers news or Sixers news, and not necessarily listen to the show or be fans of the show. So their perspective or their the perspective on the content's a lot different than someone who knows Joe DeCamera because they've been listening to him for 15 years. And, you know what I mean? So that relationship is a lot stronger than someone online who's just coming in, has a quick comment, or they're a quick troll, or they don't like this or they don't like that. So social media is a very different animal. And it's tough to navigate in today's climate.
Yeah. And so looking around the social landscape at other radio stations, where do you see the industry really doing social media well?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of different stations, and there are a lot of stations that do it well. I think, um, honestly, I think an industry like or a company like Barstool Sports really set the model back maybe 10 years ago before this was getting started, because what they learned and they realized, and the big national outlets do a good job of this too, FS1 and ESPN, et cetera. What really we're selling is personalities and talent. I mean, that's what you're driving, and that's what engagement's coming from. So you need to have those big personalities, and you need to get people like a TV show, like I was talking about before. You need to get people involved in the personalities behind the brand, because that's really what's going to drive the engagement. That's really what's going to drive that synergy and like the emotional aspect of it comes from knowing these people and really getting to know the host. So I think an outlet like Barstool really leaned into that. They did a good job of that and showed how that's can be super successful. And I think, getting some behind the scenes shots of, we you film like John Ritchie, who's former Eagle, got his haircut, and like, his new dog, and Joe DeCamara wears a full Phillies uniform for opening day, and different personal stuff like that. And shining a light into their personalities of our hosts. That's really unique, and that's what really creates a good relationship between the consumer and the brands, I think.
Yeah. And so, wrapping up, do you have any thoughts? I mean, because you've been in the space for a while now, any thoughts of where you kind of see social media content going forward?
Man, that's a I feel like I've been asked that question so many times over the years, and it's not going anywhere. Like, it's not going away, that's for sure. Um, it's transforming all the time. But I think as we see it, there's more and more video content going online. I think, you see it with cable cutting, you see it with um, live shows on Facebook, on YouTube, on X now. You're seeing people post podcasts that are hours long onto X's platform. I think that's going to be the biggest change over the next 5 years. I think it's going to be video content. I think it's going to be the way we consume long form video content. And I think it's going to be vast majority of it's going to start to shift to online with YouTube TV and Hulu and Amazon Prime and all that stuff. And you throw in X and Facebook and Instagram, and all these platforms are supporting long form video content now. And that's really huge. And audio as well. Like, audio is becoming massive with podcasts, which can be converted to video too now. That's all part of it. But like the podcast and the audio and video is just growing at a rapid rate that's really hard to comprehend. So that's kind of where I see it.
Mhm. Yeah, and IP has definitely made that sort of conversion in terms of you were saying, getting the cameras in the studio and showing the hosts and that way. Do you think that's going to be kind of the future of terrestrial radio too? Like being able to integrate video and take advantage of how you said digital platforms are changing?
Yeah, 100%. I don't think that radio stations should call themselves radio stations. Honestly, I think they're just digital media brands, the same way like Bleacher Report is, or like I said, Barstool Sports or ESPN. These are all digital media sports brands. So I don't think terrestrial radio will go away, because it's good. People like listening to it in the car when there's big news and stuff like that. But you have to be able to repackage it in podcasting form, in audio form, in video form, in written form. There's just too many ways and too many platforms to package news. There's too much content out there, so you have to be creative, and you have to be able to package quick, entertaining content. People want quick. I mean, people don't want to read long articles and listen to 4 hour shows anymore. They just don't. That's just the way it is. They want quick 10-minute clips, 2-minute clips, 30-second clips. It's a shame, and it makes our job harder, but that's what people want. That's what wins online. So yeah, I would view it as all these radio stations we're just a digital sports media brand, and we're a sports media brand in general. So like, radio is part of our business, and it's our biggest part of our business in terms of ratings and stuff. But as time goes on, this digital part of it, I think, should be viewed as equally as important, if not more important.